The mafia boss came back to the mansion earlier than expected and nearly fainted at the sight before him. Children's laughter rang out in the stillness of the afternoon, a sound so pure and so uncanny that Nathan Blackwell felt as if an invisible hand were squeezing his heart until it forgot how to beat. The Italian leather briefcase, stuffed with multi-million-dollar contracts and dark schemes, slipped from his fingers and thudded onto the white gravel path with a dry crack he did not even bother to notice. The eyes of the man who made all of Chicago bow their heads could not process what was unfolding on the lush green lawn of the very estate he owned. There, under the molten gold of 4 o'clock in the afternoon sunlight, his son Ethan, a 6-year-old boy whom 5 of the top neurologists in the United States had unanimously diagnosed with severe autism and a permanent loss of emotional connection, was clinging to a woman's neck and laughing out loud as if he had never known pain. That woman was not Serena, his flawless, beautiful fiancée. Not any of the costly therapists he had ever hired. It was Vivian Moore, the housemaid Nathan had never looked straight in the eyes for more than 2 seconds. A young woman in a cheap green uniform and bright yellow rubber gloves glittering in the sun. She was crawling on the grass, making playful hoarse whinny sounds, utterly unconcerned that the knees of her uniform were smeared with green stains. Ethan sat on her back, his tiny arms stretched wide as if he wanted to hold the whole world. His face radiant with a happiness Nathan had not witnessed once in the past 4 years. 4 years. 4 years of watching his son sit in an expensive wheelchair with vacant eyes fixed on nothingness. 4 years of listening to doctors explain that Ethan's muscles had wasted and stiffened, that the boy could not support his own body weight, that laughter was a reflex that could not happen in his condition. 4 years of spending millions of dollars on the most advanced treatments, the most expensive medical devices, the so-called best specialists. And now, a housemaid in $2 rubber gloves was doing what all his money could not buy. The gun hidden beneath his suit suddenly felt as heavy as a stone, dragging his shoulder down. Nathan Blackwell, the man who had once faced an enemy's muzzle without blinking, the man who had given orders to take care of people without a flicker of hesitation, now stood rooted in place like a statue before the sight of his son laughing and playing. The contrast was so sharp it felt cruel. His $15,000 suit against the girl's cheap uniform. The power of a mafia boss who terrified an entire city against the helplessness of a father who could not make his own child smile. 5 top neurologists with every degree and every reputation had failed miserably, while a girl who had not graduated from college was creating a miracle right in front of him. Nathan's mind spun, trying to reconcile contradictions that had no explanation. This morning, just before he left for a meeting, Serena had spoken to him in a sweet, worried voice, saying Ethan needed a higher dose of sedatives because of uncontrollable aggressive episodes. She said the boy had scratched a nurse, had screamed all night, had completely lost touch with reality. But the child laughing in front of him did not look like a patient who needed sedatives. The boy was alive, he was feeling, he was loving. A question detonated in Nathan's head like an atomic bomb, shattering every belief he had built over the past 4 years. If his son could laugh, could hug, could play like a normal child, then who had lied to him? Who had made him believe Ethan was an empty shell with no emotions left? Who had stolen 4 years of his son's childhood and turned the boy into a ghost in his own home? And most of all, why? Nathan felt the ground beneath his feet begin to tremble. Everything he knew, everything he believed, everything he had accepted for 4 years was collapsing into ruin. And in the wreckage of that utterly overturned understanding, only one thing was clear in a way that hurt. Someone had deceived him. Someone would pay. If you want to know the horrifying truth behind this plot, tap like to support the channel. Share the video with friends who love drama, and do not forget to subscribe so you do not miss what happens next. Nathan walked toward the garden, each heavy step grinding into the white gravel, that rasping sound bursting the fragile bubble of happiness that had been floating over the green lawn. Vivian heard it, and her whole body locked up, as if someone had poured a bucket of ice water over her head. She turned, and her face went pale in an instant when she saw the tall figure of Nathan Blackwell moving straight toward her. In her mind, Serena's cold voice rang out at once, the rule that woman had repeated again and again on Vivian's very first day in this mansion. Do not touch the young master. Touch him, and you're fired immediately. No letter of recommendation, not a single cent of compensation. Vivian hurriedly lowered Ethan onto the grass, so rushed she nearly made the boy fall. She dropped to her knees, head bowed, not daring to lift her eyes to the master of the house. Her hands, still inside the bright yellow rubber gloves, trembled in front of her chest like someone waiting for a death sentence. Her heart hammered as if it wanted to leap from her ribs, her breathing turning quick and shallow. She had made a fatal mistake. She had broken the most important rule, and now she would lose the only job keeping her alive, lose her shelter, lose everything. But what startled Vivian was that Ethan refused to leave her. The boy clutched the sleeve of her uniform, his tiny fingers gripping as if it were the only life preserver in a vast ocean. He let out a protesting moan, a sound clear and deliberate, nothing like the meaningless grunts the doctors had described in his medical record. Nathan stopped a few steps away, his sharp, cold eyes taking in every smallest detail. He watched the way his son clung to the maid, watched the unmistakable resistance in each of the boy's movements, and his mind began to process what he was seeing. This was not an unconscious reflex the doctors had been explaining for 4 years. This was an intentional act by a child fully aware of the world around him. Then Ethan did something that made Nathan feel as if someone had punched him straight in the chest. The boy sensed the tension radiating from Vivian, sensed the fear trembling through her body, and he acted. Ethan released Vivian's sleeve, crawled forward, then stood up on his small legs, standing tall right in front of the housemaid like a living shield. His tiny arms lifted, spread wide to either side as if he were trying to protect Vivian from any danger at all. The boy's brown eyes, the very eyes that looked exactly like his late mother's, stared straight into Nathan's with an expression this man had never once seen on his son's face. It was a guarded look, a wary look, the look of a child trying to protect the one he loved from an enemy, and that enemy was his own father. Nathan felt a stab of pain tear through his chest, sharper than any bullet he had ever faced in a life soaked in violence. His son, the child doctors had sworn could not recognize family, was standing there protecting a housemaid from him. The brutal truth crashed over him like a tidal wave. In Ethan's eyes, Nathan Blackwell was not his father. He was a stranger. He was a threat. He was something his son needed to be wary of. And Vivian, the housemaid with the cheap yellow rubber gloves, was safety, was someone to trust, was someone worth protecting. Vivian's voice rose, trembling, into the heavy silence. "Sir, I'm sorry. I didn't know you were coming home early." She stayed kneeling on the ground, head lowered, not daring to look up. Nathan swallowed hard, his throat dry and bitter. When he spoke, his voice came out hoarse, unfamiliar even to himself. "Stay where you are. Don't move." Vivian went rigid, waiting for the fury to erupt, waiting for the shouted insults, waiting for the cold declaration of dismissal she had been playing in her mind since the moment she saw him. But nothing happened. Nathan only stood there, motionless as a statue, watching his son with those tiny arms raised, protecting the housemaid. He stood in his own garden, in the mansion he owned, in the empire he had built with blood and tears, and he felt like a stranger, an intruder, someone unwelcome. 4 years. Where had he been when his son needed a father? What had he been doing while Ethan grew up in loneliness and fear? What had he been believing while the truth sat right in front of his eyes? If only he had been willing to take the time to look. Nathan Blackwell, the mafia boss who didn't know what fear was, felt for the first time in his life a pain that money couldn't buy a cure for and power couldn't erase. The pain of a father who had become an enemy in his own son's eyes. Nathan moved closer, his voice coming fast and raw with desperation. Since when has he been able to laugh like that? The doctors said his muscles had wasted and stiffened. He couldn't support his own body weight. They said laughter was a reflex that couldn't exist in his condition. Since when? The questions fired out like bullets, one after another, each word carrying the bewilderment of a man watching his entire understanding of reality collapse into shards. Vivian was still kneeling on the lawn, but when she heard that question, she slowly lifted her head. For the first time since she had set foot in this mansion, she looked straight into Nathan Blackwell's eyes. No fear, no lowered gaze. In that moment, she forgot the man in front of her was the most powerful mafia boss in Chicago. Forgot she was only a small, invisible maid. Forgot every rule and boundary she had obeyed for 8 months. Her voice rose, filled with a fierce protectiveness for the boy standing between them. "Always, sir. He's always known how to laugh, always known how to hug, always known how to love. He recognizes every person in this house. He's nothing like what they told you." Nathan stood frozen, Vivian's words slicing into his heart like blades. Always. One simple word, but it carried the weight of 4 years of lies. He stared at Vivian, his eyes demanding an explanation, and she began to tell him. She had worked here for 8 months, at first only cleaning the first floor, not allowed upstairs, not allowed near the young master, not allowed to do anything beyond wiping surfaces and scrubbing floors. But one night, when the whole mansion had sunk into sleep, she heard crying. A small, thin sound slipping out from a room on the second floor, the room she had been warned never to enter. Vivian knew she was breaking the rule, knew she could be fired on the spot if she was caught. But that crying, the crying of a child alone in the middle of the night, made it impossible to turn away. She crept up the stairs, gently pushed open Ethan's door, and what she saw changed everything. Ethan wasn't asleep. The boy was lying in bed, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling, completely awake. When she stepped inside, he turned his head, and those brown eyes looked at her with an expression Vivian would never forget. It was a pleading look, the look of a child desperately searching for help. He was afraid, but not afraid of Vivian. He was afraid of something else, something she couldn't understand yet, not then. From that night on, Vivian began to meet Ethan in secret. Every night, when everyone else was asleep, she slipped into the boy's room again, sat beside his bed, held his hand, whispered fairy tales. Little by little, Ethan began to trust her. He began to respond, began to laugh, began to reach out and wrap his arms around her, the way an ordinary child starved for warmth would. And then Vivian discovered the most important thing of all. Every morning, Serena herself would give Ethan something she called a vitamin, a purple syrup in a small glass bottle. Serena said it was a supplement, something necessary to maintain the boy's health. But after each dose of that syrup, Ethan changed completely. The bright sparkle in his eyes went empty. The body that had been lively turned limp, as if the bones had vanished. The boy became a hollow shell, sitting in his wheelchair, staring into nothing, not reacting to anything around him. Vivian suspected that purple syrup wasn't a vitamin at all. But who was she? She was only a maid with no degree, no voice, no power. Who would believe her if she stood up and accused the beautiful fiancé of the mafia boss? Nathan felt his mind spinning. 4 years, millions of dollars, 5 of the top neurologists in the United States, the most expensive medical devices, the most advanced treatments. All of it had been lies. His son wasn't autistic at all. His son had been systematically poisoned for 4 years under his own roof. He looked at Vivian, his voice hoarse. "Why didn't you go to the police?" Vivian answered with a bitter smile. "Who am I, sir? I'm a maid with no education, no family, no one standing behind me, and Serena is the fiancée of the most powerful mafia boss in this city. If I went to the police, who would believe me? They'd laugh in my face and throw me out of the station, and the next day I'd disappear without a trace, while Ethan would keep being trapped in a hell no one knew existed." Nathan stood there in silence, feeling every word Vivian spoke like needles driven through flesh. She was right. In his world, truth didn't matter more than power. And Serena, she had all the power a woman needed to silence an unknown maid. But now Nathan knew the truth, and someone was going to pay for the 4 years of hell his son had been forced to endure. It was long past midnight, but Nathan couldn't fall asleep. He sat alone in his pitch-dark study, with only the cold moonlight slipping through the large window pane and laying pale, ghostly streaks across the wooden floor. The glass of whiskey in his hand had been empty for a long time, yet he still gripped it, his fingers tightening around the rim as if it were the only thing keeping him from dropping into the abyss. Vivian's words kept echoing inside his head. Always. He's always known how to laugh, always known how to hug, and then memory surged in like a flood he couldn't hold back, dragging him to 4 years earlier, to the day his life shattered completely. 4 years ago, Nathan got a call from the hospital while he was in the middle of an important meeting with partners. The voice on the other end, cold and professional, informed him that his wife, Catherine, had been in a serious car accident on the highway. The vehicle had lost control, crashed through the guardrail, and plunged into a deep ravine. Catherine died at the scene. Ethan, his son, only 2 years old at the time, had been sitting in the back seat. The boy survived by some miracle, but the doctors said his brain had been severely injured by the impact. Nathan remembered driving like a madman to the hospital, remembered seeing Catherine's body covered beneath a white sheet, remembered the feeling as if someone had reached into his chest, ripped his heart out, and crushed it right in front of his eyes. Catherine had been the only light in his dark world. She was the only woman who had seen the real man behind the cold mask of a mafia boss. She loved him not for money or power, but for who he was. And now she was gone, leaving him alone with a son the doctor said would never be normal again. Catherine's funeral lasted 3 days. Nathan didn't remember much of those days, only that he stood like a statue beside his wife's coffin, only the sobbing of the mourners, only the emptiness, as if someone had carved a massive hollow straight through his soul. And then Serena appeared. Serena Cross, Catherine's half-sister on their father's side, a woman he'd met only a handful of times at family gatherings. She came to him right after the funeral, her eyes red from crying, her voice gentle and full of sympathy. She told him to focus on his work. She would take care of Ethan. It was what Catherine would have wanted. It was the only way Serena could honor her sister's memory. Nathan had been too consumed by grief to think, too exhausted to question anything. His underground empire was threatened then by rival gangs. He had to fight to protect what he'd built. He didn't have the time to care for a child with brain damage, so he nodded, handing his son over to Serena without a trace of suspicion. From that point on, every time he saw Ethan, the boy was always in that expensive wheelchair, lifeless eyes fixed on nothing, his body rigid as a doll. Serena said the doctors had done everything they could, said Ethan's condition couldn't improve, said Nathan had to accept the truth that his son would be that way forever. And Nathan believed her. He believed every word she said, believed the medical reports, believed the devotion she displayed every day at Ethan's side. He believed until he was blind. But now, sitting in the darkness with an empty glass in his hand, doubts began to creep through Nathan's mind like poisonous snakes. Had the car accident that day truly been an accident? Why had Serena appeared at exactly the right time, ready to take on every responsibility for Ethan's care without asking for anything? She had poisoned his son for 4 years. So what was her final purpose? Nathan set the glass down on the desk and pressed the call button on the intercom. A few minutes later, Marcus entered the room, alert despite it being near midnight. Marcus was Nathan's right hand, the most loyal man he had in the organization, the only person he trusted completely. Nathan looked at Marcus, his voice cold and firm. "I need you to investigate the medicine Ethan's been taking. Find out what it really is and who prescribed it. Find every piece of information about Dr. Preston, the neurologist who diagnosed my son. And one more thing. Reopen the file on Catherine's car accident from 4 years ago. I want everything, every smallest detail. Don't miss a single thing." Marcus stood still for a second, his sharp eyes sweeping Nathan's face as if trying to read what was happening. Then he spoke. "Sir, if this is a plot like you think, it's very big, very dangerous, and someone has been planning it for a long time." Nathan rose to his feet, his shadow thrown against the wall like a massive monster in the cold moonlight. His voice cut through the dark room, sharp as a blade. "If it's a plot, then someone will pay, and I promise you, that price will be very expensive." The next day, Serena returned to the mansion from a 2-day spa trip. She stepped inside in an elegant cream dress, her glossy brown hair spilling over her shoulders, her skin glowing as if it had been tended by the best experts money could buy. Beautiful, refined, flawless as always. She walked up to Nathan, who was sitting in the living room, leaned in to press a light kiss to his cheek, and spoke in a voice sweet as honey. "You came home early yesterday. Why didn't you call me?" Nathan looked up at her, his face giving away nothing. 4 years in the underworld had taught him how to wear a perfect mask. He answered evenly. The meeting ended earlier than expected. "I wanted to come home and see Ethan." Serena gave a soft laugh, bright as wind chimes. "Ethan. I already gave him his medicine. He's resting in his room. You know how it is. He doesn't recognize anyone. Visiting him is like looking at a wall." That line, once, Nathan would have nodded at as an obvious truth. But now, after what he had witnessed in the garden yesterday afternoon, after Vivian's account, it cut into his ears like a knife. He doesn't recognize anyone. Nathan had to clench his jaw to keep a growl of anger from breaking loose. Dinner was served in the grand dining room, the long oak table arranged with careful elegance, candles and fresh flowers laid out just so. Serena sat across from Nathan, and Ethan was placed in the special high chair beside her. The boy sat there with dull, unfocused eyes, his body limp as a doll with its winding key removed. Nathan watched his son and saw, with brutal clarity, how different this was from the child laughing on the lawn the day before. The medicine. That damned purple syrup had turned his son into this. Serena reached over, gently wiped Ethan's mouth, smoothed his hair, whispering sweet words. "Eat, sweetheart, good boy, Auntie loves you." Her movements were practiced and tender, exactly what a devoted caretaker should look like. But this time Nathan watched with different eyes. He saw what he had missed for 4 years. Every time Serena's hand touched him, Ethan flinched. His small body tensed, his tiny shoulders trembling as if he were trying to pull away from a danger he couldn't name. And his eyes, the eyes Serena called empty and incapable of recognition, never looked at her. They kept drifting toward one corner of the room, where Vivian stood quietly, waiting to serve. The way Ethan looked at Vivian was nothing like the way he looked at Serena. There was longing in it, and trust, and a kind of peace. Nathan glanced toward that corner and caught Vivian with her head lowered, avoiding every gaze, her hands clasped tight at her stomach. That girl knew she was being watched, knew she had to keep her distance, knew one wrong movement could cost her more than a job. It could cost her life. And then Nathan saw Serena glance at Vivian. Just a flicker of a look, but it was enough for him to read everything inside it. Cold, contempt, hatred. That wasn't the look of an employer toward a servant. That was the look of an enemy toward a threat. Nathan pretended he hadn't seen a thing. He cut a piece of steak on his plate and asked in a normal voice, "Has the new medicine been working lately?" Serena turned back with a gentle smile. "Dr. Preston says we might need to increase the dose a little. Ethan has seemed a bit restless lately. Sometimes he has strange reactions the doctor can't explain." Nathan nodded, his gaze sliding to the small glass bottle of purple syrup sitting on the table, right beside Ethan's plate. "I understand." 2 simple words, but the true meaning behind them was nothing like what Serena thought. He understood his son was being poisoned every day. He understood the woman sitting across from him was a venomous snake wearing a human face. He understood he had to act perfectly until he had enough evidence in his hands. Dinner ended in a manufactured silence. Nathan went to his private room, closed the door, and stood in the darkness, his fist clenched so tightly his knuckles went white. Rage churned in his chest like a volcano about to erupt. But he had to hold it down, had to wait, had to be patient. Marcus was investigating. The truth would be exposed soon, and when it was, Serena would learn what Nathan Blackwell's fury truly looked like. The cat-and-mouse game had officially begun, and Nathan was certain he wouldn't be the mouse. 3 days passed in a tense, suffocating wait. 3 days in which Nathan had to perform perfection, had to watch Serena smile at him each morning, had to witness her spoon purple syrup into his son's mouth, and do nothing. 3 days of swallowing his rage whole, waiting for Marcus to return with the missing pieces of the truth. And finally, on the 3rd night, Marcus knocked on the door of his study, with a thick briefcase in his hand. Nathan sat behind the desk, motioned for Marcus to close the door, and begin his report. Marcus set the case on the desk, opened it, and pulled out a stack of files, his voice low and steady. "Sir, I investigated Dr. Howard Preston as you asked, and what I found is deeply troubling. Dr. Preston is not a pediatric neurologist as he claims. He's a psychiatrist, specialized in sedatives and anesthesia for severely mentally ill patients. His credentials are real, but his specialty is completely wrong for what the young master needs." Nathan tightened his grip on the chair's armrest until his knuckles went white, but he said nothing, only nodded for Marcus to continue. Marcus turned to the next page. "As for the medicine Ethan has been taking, sir, it isn't a vitamin like Serena says. I had a pharmacology expert analyze a sample, and the results show it's a mixture of haloperidol and benzodiazepine. These are extremely strong sedatives, typically used only for severely psychiatric patients in specialized medical facilities. The dosage in Ethan's bottle is enough to turn a healthy adult into a vegetable, let alone a 6-year-old child." Nathan felt nausea rise into his throat. His son had been poisoned for 4 years, under his own roof, right in front of him, and he had never known. Marcus continued, "And one more thing, sir. I tracked Serena's financial transactions over the past few years. Every month she withdraws $10,000 in cash from her personal account and delivers it directly to Dr. Preston. No bank transfer, no invoice, no paperwork that could leave a trace. In total, over 4 years, she spent nearly $500,000 paying for the poisoning of the young master." Nathan stood, walked to the window, and stared out at the garden, black and silent beyond the glass. $500,000. Serena had spent $500,000 to turn his son into a living corpse. He took a slow, deep breath, forcing down the fury, screaming to break free. "What about Catherine's accident?" Marcus went quiet for a second before answering, still investigating. "Sir, the case file was closed long ago, with the conclusion of a loss of control accident. But I found one detail that's highly suspicious." Nathan turned back, eyes sharp as blades. "What detail?" "Catherine's car was taken in for maintenance 1 week before the accident. I found the garage that did the work and obtained a copy of the service request. The person who scheduled the maintenance that day, sir, was Serena Cross. Nathan felt the blood in his body turn to ice. Serena scheduled Catherine's maintenance. A week later, Catherine died in a crash, said to be caused by losing control. It couldn't be coincidence. It couldn't possibly be coincidence. Keep digging, Nathan said, his voice cold as ice. Find the mechanic who serviced the car that day. Find out what they did to the vehicle, who had access to it after the maintenance was completed. I need solid proof before I act. If Serena truly killed Catherine, I won't let her die easily. Marcus nodded. I understand, sir. But I need to ask, what do you plan to do with her while we're waiting? She's living under the same roof as you and Ethan. Nathan returned to the desk, sat back down, his eyes cold and calculating, like a leopard stalking prey. She won't suspect anything. We'll keep playing the blind fiancé until we have enough proof. But from now on, I want our people watching her every move, every call, every meeting. And most importantly, find a way to replace Ethan's medicine with a fake without her noticing. My son won't swallow another drop of poison. Marcus nodded and left, leaving Nathan alone in the dark room. He sat there, staring into emptiness, his mind spinning with what he had just learned. His son wasn't autistic at all. Ethan had been systematically poisoned for 4 years. And behind it all was Serena, the woman he had trusted, the woman he planned to marry, the woman who might have killed Catherine. Nathan clenched his hand, his nails digging into his palm until it bled without him even noticing. She would pay for everything, penny by penny. That night, after Marcus left, Nathan had someone summon Vivian to his study. She stepped into the dark room with worry written all over her face, her hands clasped tightly in front of her stomach, her gaze lowered, not daring to look straight at her employer. Nathan sat behind his desk, watching her in silence for a long time before he spoke. Sit down. Vivian hesitated, then sat in the chair across from the desk, back straight, shoulders tense, like a small animal ready to bolt at any second. Nathan looked at her, and his voice wasn't as cold as it usually was. There was something else in it now. I need to know about you, Vivian. Where are you from? Who were you before you came here? Vivian lifted her head, surprise plain on her face. She hadn't expected the most powerful mafia boss in Chicago to care about the background of an ordinary maid like her. But then she understood. He was trying to confirm whether she was someone's spy, whether she was a link in some larger scheme. She took a deep breath and began to speak, her voice soft but steady. I'm an orphan, sir. I never knew my parents' faces, never knew who they were, never knew why they abandoned me. The only thing I know is that I was found outside the gate of an orphanage on the outskirts of the city when I was only a few days old, wrapped in an old torn blanket, with no name, no papers, nothing at all. She paused for a moment, as if swallowing painful memories. I grew up in that orphanage, where every day was a fight to survive. Hunger, loneliness, and being bullied by older kids. I learned that in this world, nobody would save me except myself. Nathan sat quietly, listening, his eyes never leaving Vivian's face. She continued, and her voice began to tremble. When I was 18, a family came to the orphanage and said they wanted to adopt me. I thought it was a miracle. Thought God had finally seen me. Thought I was going to have a real family. But I was wrong. It wasn't heaven. It was hell. Vivian pulled up her sleeve, revealing faint scars running along her arm. The man who adopted me was abusive. He beat me for any reason. Because the rice wasn't fully cooked. Because the house wasn't clean enough. Because I looked at him the wrong way. 4 years, sir. 4 years I lived in that hell, too afraid to cry for help because he threatened to kill me if I told anyone a single word. Nathan felt his jaw tighten as he listened. He had seen cruelty in his life, had inflicted more than his share of suffering on others, but the torment of an orphaned child with nowhere to run still stirred anger in him. Vivian lowered her sleeve again, covering the scars. When I was 22, I ran. I left that house with nothing but my bare hands and a body full of scars. I wandered the streets, doing anything to survive. Washing dishes, cleaning houses, carrying trays in small restaurants. I saved every dollar and tried to go to college for psychology because I wanted to understand why people could be so evil to each other. But by my 3rd year, I didn't have enough money to continue. I had to drop out in the middle and work as a maid to survive. Nathan watched her, his voice lowering. Then why did you risk your life for Ethan? You had nothing to gain. Nobody paid you for it. Nobody would even know. Nobody would thank you. Why would you risk everything for a child who isn't yours? Vivian raised her head, and for the first time in the conversation, she looked straight into Nathan's eyes. her brown eyes lit with something fierce. "Because I know what that feels like, sir. I know what it feels like to be trapped in hell and have nobody hear you screaming. I know what it feels like to look out at the world and see people walking by, laughing, living normal lives while you're dying slowly and nobody even knows." When I looked into Ethan's eyes that night, I saw myself from years ago. I saw a child desperately begging for help and no one listening. I couldn't leave him. I couldn't turn away and pretend I didn't see. If I did, I'd be no different from the people who abandoned me back then. Nathan sat there, looking at the young woman in front of him, and for the first time, he truly saw her. Not the maid in a green uniform and bright yellow rubber gloves, but a human being who had been through hell and survived, a warrior stronger than anyone he'd ever met in the violent underworld. And inside the cold chest of the mafia boss, for the first time in 4 years since Catherine was gone, something warm began to kindle. While Nathan and Vivian were talking, the door to the study suddenly creaked open with a soft, uneasy sound. They both turned, and there in the doorway stood a small figure, brown hair tousled, eyes still heavy with sleep but brightening the moment they found Vivian. Ethan had slipped out of bed in the middle of the night to look for the one person he trusted most in this house. When he saw Vivian, his face lit up and he ran straight to her, his tiny arms wrapping tightly around her leg as if he were afraid she might disappear. Vivian bent down, smoothed his hair, her voice gentle and warm. "Why aren't you sleeping? It's night already. You need to rest." Nathan stood there watching, and his heart flinched with a pain so sharp it felt like a knife driven clean through him. For 4 years, his son had never run to him like that. For 4 years, he had only seen a child in a wheelchair with hollow eyes, never reacting when Nathan entered the room, never reaching out when Nathan stood close. He had thought it was sickness, brain damage, a cruel fate. But now he knew the truth. His son didn't hug him, not because he couldn't, but because he didn't know who Nathan was. To Ethan, Nathan was only a strange shadow that appeared and vanished from time to time, not a father he could trust and love. Then something miraculous happened. Ethan lifted his head to look at Vivian, then slowly turned to look at Nathan. The boy's brown eyes, the very eyes that mirrored Catherine's, held something different from the guarded wariness Nathan had seen in the garden that day. Ethan hesitated for a second, as if wrestling with himself, then did something that stole Nathan's breath. Ethan reached out his tiny hand and took his father's finger. It was such a simple gesture, but to Nathan it was more precious than every multi-million-dollar contract he had ever signed, more precious than all the power and money he had spent a lifetime accumulating. This was the first time in 4 years his son had chosen to touch him. That small hand was warm and soft, holding his finger as if searching for safety, as if trying to connect to a father the boy had never truly known. Nathan Blackwell, the mafia boss who made the entire city of Chicago tremble, the man who had faced death without blinking, stood there with eyes gone red and a throat locked tight. He couldn't speak, couldn't move, could only stand and feel the warmth of his son's hand. Then Ethan spoke, his voice small and slow, each word placed carefully as if he were trying with all his strength to get it right. "Dad, don't fire Vivian." 5 words, only 5 simple words, but they carried all the fear and longing of a 6-year-old child who had been trapped in darkness for 4 years. Nathan dropped to his knees on the floor, no longer caring about the expensive suit or the image of a powerful boss, and he pulled his son into his arms, holding him so tightly it was as if the boy might vanish if he let go. His voice shook as he whispered into Ethan's ear, "I'm not firing anyone. I'm sorry, son. I'm sorry I wasn't with you. I'm sorry I didn't protect you. I'm sorry." Vivian stood beside them, tears sliding silently down her cheeks as she watched father and son reunite after 4 years apart. She stepped back, wanting to give them privacy, but Ethan wouldn't let her. He reached one hand out, grabbed Vivian's hand, and pulled her closer. In Nathan's arms, the boy held on to both of them, as if this was the family he had always been craving. No one in that room knew that just outside the half-open door, Serena was standing in the hallway shadows. She had woken up when she couldn't find Nathan beside her, and had gone looking for him, but instead of entering, she stopped when she heard voices. She stood there, listening to every word, watching every movement through the narrow crack of the door. Her eyes slowly turned to ice, her lips pressing into a hard line. Nathan knew. Somehow, he knew. That damned little maid had told him everything. Serena backed away in silence, her footsteps making no sound on the carpet. She turned and walked back to her room, her mind spinning with calculations. She needed to act now, before it was too late. 4 years of a perfect plan couldn't be destroyed by an anonymous maid and a mafia boss who suddenly wanted to be a good father. Serena wasn't going to let that happen, no matter what she had to do. 2 days passed after that night. 2 days in which Serena lived with anxiety and a slow burning anger. She knew Nathan had changed, knew he was hiding something from her, knew that little maid had said things she had no right to say. She couldn't let it go on like this. Couldn't sit still and watch 4 years of a perfect plan collapse because of an anonymous girl in bright yellow rubber gloves. Serena needed to act, and she needed to act now. Last night, when the entire mansion had sunk into sleep, Serena slipped into Vivian's room. She moved like a ghost, opened the maid's wardrobe drawer, and placed inside it a glittering diamond necklace, the most expensive piece of jewelry she owned, the heirloom her mother had left her before she died. Serena didn't hesitate. She was willing to sacrifice anything to remove Vivian from this house. The next afternoon, the performance began. Serena called every employee in the mansion to gather in the grand foyer. From the gardener to the chef, from the driver to the cleaners. They stood in a line with anxious faces, not understanding what was happening. Then Serena appeared at the top of the stairs and began to descend, one step at a time, slow and theatrical. In her hand was the diamond necklace, and her face twisted into an expression of perfectly acted grief, tears shimmering in her eyes. She stopped in the middle of the foyer, and her trembling voice carried through the silence. "This necklace is the only keepsake my mother left me before she died. It means more to me than my own life. And today, I found it in the room of one of you." Serena lifted her hand, her index finger pointing straight at Vivian, who was standing in the corner of the foyer, in that girl's room. Every gaze snapped toward Vivian, cold and condemning. 2 security guards stepped forward, each grabbing one of her arms and dragging her into the center of the foyer. Vivian didn't even have time to react. She was shoved down onto the freezing marble floor, her knees striking the hard stone and making her wince in pain. She looked up, eyes wide with horror, her voice breaking in desperation. "I didn't take it. I swear. I never go into Serena's room. I don't even know what that necklace looks like." Serena stepped closer, standing over Vivian, looking down with an expression that was both wounded and furious. A performance worthy of an Oscar. "I trusted you. Vivian, I gave you a job when you had nothing. I gave you a roof when you were wandering the streets. I treated you like family, and this is how you betray me. You stole my mother's keepsake." Serena's tears rolled down her cheeks, perfect, meticulous crocodile tears. She turned to the staff gathered around them, her voice thick with outrage. "Call the police. Throw this girl out of here immediately. I don't want to see her face for one more second." The employees began to whisper, looks of disgust and contempt pouring down on Vivian. The chef shook her head in disappointment. The gardener folded his arms and stared at her like she was a criminal. And even Mrs. Webb, the elderly housekeeper who had worked in this mansion for 20 years, only lowered her head, not daring to look, not daring to speak. No one defended Vivian. No one believed her. She was alone inside a hostile circle, knees on cold marble, tears soaking her cheeks, while words failed her. She wanted to scream that she was innocent, wanted to explain she was being framed, but she knew no one would listen. She was only a poor maid, with no family, no relatives, no one to stand on her side. Serena, meanwhile, was the mafia boss's fiancée, a beautiful, powerful woman, someone everyone feared and respected. Who would believe a girl like Vivian over someone like Serena? But what hurt Vivian most wasn't being framed, wasn't the prospect of being fired and sent to jail for theft. What hurt most was thinking of Ethan. If she was thrown out, who would protect him? Who would slip into his room late at night to hold his hand and whisper fairy tales? Who would remind him he wasn't alone, that someone loved him? Serena would keep poisoning him, turning him back into a lifeless body in a wheelchair, and this time there would be no one left to save him. Vivian lifted her head and looked at Serena, eyes red from crying but still flashing with anger. "You know I didn't take it. You know better than anyone." Serena gave a thin smile, tilting her head as she looked at Vivian the way you look at a pathetic insect. "I don't know what you're talking about. The only thing I know is that my mother's necklace was in your drawer. Now you can explain that to the police." Serena turned toward one of the guards, about to order him to make the call, when a low, cold voice rang out from the staircase. "Enough." Everyone in the foyer turned toward the staircase, where Nathan Blackwell stood with a face cold as ice. He came down one step at a time, slow and deliberate, his sharp gaze never leaving Serena. Serena let a triumphant smile bloom, certain Nathan had appeared to support her, to punish the despicable thief at her feet. She moved toward him, her voice honeyed and flawlessly wounded. "Darling, you see, this girl stole my mother's necklace, the only keepsake I have left." But Nathan didn't stop beside Serena. He walked straight past her as if she didn't exist, and went to Vivian, still kneeling on the cold marble. He bent down, offered his hand, and gently helped her to her feet, careful and tender as if she were something precious that could shatter at any moment. Serena froze, the smile wiped clean from her mouth, replaced by stunned confusion. "You, what are you doing? You're helping a thief up." Nathan turned to her, his voice cold and sharp as a blade. "She didn't steal anything." Serena forced a laugh, trying to steady herself. "You believe that stray more than you believe me. I'm your fiancé. I'm the one who's been beside you and taking care of Ethan for 4 years. And that girl is just a nobody maid." Nathan looked straight into Serena's eyes, his gaze so cold it made her shiver. "I don't believe a stray. I believe the security cameras." Serena felt as if a bucket of ice water had been dumped over her head. Nathan signaled to Marcus, who was standing in the corner of the foyer, and immediately the large wall-mounted television lit up. The footage was sharp down to the smallest detail, a recording from a hidden security camera in the hallway. On the screen, Serena appeared at 2 a.m. last night, slipping down the corridor with the light, silent steps of a thief. She stopped at Vivian's door, glanced around to make sure no one was watching, then opened it and went inside. The camera in the room captured her opening the wardrobe drawer and placing the diamond necklace inside, before she slipped back out with a satisfied smile on her lips. The foyer fell into a deadly silence. The employees who had just been staring at Vivian with contempt now stood with mouths open, unable to believe what they were seeing. Mrs. Webb lifted a hand to cover her mouth, her old eyes wide with horror. Serena stood there, her face pale as paper, her body trembling beyond her control. "You were spying on me." Her voice rang out, caught between panic and fury. "You put cameras on me in our own house." Nathan stepped closer, each footfall like a hammer driving nails into Serena's coffin. "I wasn't only watching you. I also know you've been paying $10,000 in cash every month to Dr. Howard Preston." Serena stumbled back a step, her legs threatening to fold. Nathan went on, his voice cold and merciless. "I know the vitamin you've been giving my son every morning is actually a mixture of haloperidol and benzodiazepine, extremely powerful sedatives used only for severely psychiatric patients. I know the dose you've been giving Ethan is enough to turn a healthy adult into a vegetable, let alone a 6-year-old child. And I know you've been poisoning my son for 4 years. Serena backed up again until her spine hit the wall. The flawless mask she had worn for 4 years began to crack, then fall apart piece by piece. She looked around like an animal cornered, searching for an exit, but there was none. Every eye in the foyer was on her now, no longer respectful, no longer afraid, only disgusted and furious. Nathan stepped close until he stood directly in front of her, his eyes 2 black, bottomless pits without a trace of emotion. 4 years, Serena, 4 years you turned my son into a living corpse. 4 years you made me believe his brain damage was permanent. 4 years you stole Ethan's childhood and my peace. Do you have any idea how much it broke me every time I saw my son in that wheelchair with those empty eyes?" Serena pressed her lips together, and something dangerous flashed in her eyes. She knew she was exposed, knew no lie could save her now. But Serena Cross wasn't the kind of woman who surrendered easily. She had spent 4 years building this plan, sacrificed too much to get this far, and she wasn't going to let it collapse because of a maid and a few videos. If she had to go under, she would drag everyone down with her. Serena lifted her chin, looked straight into Nathan's eyes, and a strange smile spread across her mouth, the smile of someone with nothing left to lose. Serena stood with her back against the wall, that strange smile still lingering on her lips. She didn't deny it. She didn't cry or beg the way everyone expected. Instead, she lifted her chin, eyes cold as ice fixed on Nathan, and played her final card. Her voice carried through the foyer, sharp and dripping with venom. "You want to know why I did all of this? Because Catherine deserved it." Nathan went rigid, the name of his late wife hitting him like a blade, driven straight into his chest. Serena went on, her mouth curving into a bitter smile. "My perfect sister, the woman you loved with everything you had, the one you thought was a saint. She betrayed you, Nathan. She had another man. And Ethan, the child you've mourned for 4 years, he might not even be yours." The grand foyer fell silent as paper. Everyone held their breath, waiting for Nathan's reaction. He stood there, his face draining of color for a heartbeat. "What did you just say?" Serena stepped forward one pace, the fear from moments ago seeming to vanish, replaced by something dangerously unhinged. You think you knew Catherine. You didn't know anything about her. You were busy with your underworld empire, busy with power wars, while she was at home alone with other men. I knew everything. I have proof. And I protected you from that humiliating truth for 4 years. I was afraid Ethan wasn't your blood but would inherit everything. I did it all for you. Nathan looked at Serena, his eyes slowly recovering their calm. He knew Catherine. He loved Catherine more than anyone in this world. He knew she wasn't that kind of woman. This was psychological warfare, Serena's last attempt to throw him off balance, to confuse him, to make him lose focus. He answered coldly, "Even if that were true, you still had no right to poison a 2-year-old child for 4 years. Whoever Ethan's father is, he's still an innocent child. You stole 4 years of his childhood, turned him into a vegetable, trapped him in hell under the roof of his own father. No reason can justify that." And that was when Serena lost control completely. The sweet, refined mask she had worn for 4 years shattered, exposing the real face beneath, wild and full of hatred. She screamed, her voice shrill and feral. "Yes, I poisoned him. I made him drink it every day so he'd become a useless lump of flesh. You want to know why? Because if he was healthy, he would inherit everything. Your entire empire, all your money, your power, all of it would belong to him. And me, what would I get? I took care of him for 4 years. I played the role of the good aunt, the perfect fiancé for 4 years. I deserved to be rewarded." Serena shrieked, tears starting to spill down her cheeks. But they weren't tears of sorrow. They were tears of madness and rage. Catherine always had everything. Father loved her. Our stepmother spoiled her. You loved her. And me. I was only the half-sister no one even bothered to look at. I lived in her shadow my whole life. And when she died, I thought I finally had a chance. Finally I could take what should have been mine. Nathan stood there, cold as an ice statue, not a flicker of emotion on his face. When Serena paused to breathe, he spoke, his voice so calm it was frightening. "You will be rewarded. In prison." Serena laughed like a madwoman. "You can't do anything to me. I have proof Catherine cheated. I have photos, messages, everything. If you send me to prison, I'll release it all. A scandal will explode. The whole city will know what your wife really was. Do you want that?" Nathan stepped closer, each footfall heavy with threat. He stopped right in front of Serena, nearly a head taller, his shadow swallowing her like the darkness of death. His voice dropped low and dangerous. "You think I'm afraid of a scandal? You think I care what people say? Have you forgotten who I am?" Serena stared into Nathan's eyes, and for the first time, she truly felt fear. She had forgotten. She had been so consumed by her plan that she'd forgotten the man in front of her wasn't some ordinary businessman. This was Nathan Blackwell, the mafia boss who made all of Chicago tremble, a man who had made people disappear without a trace for daring to betray him. She wasn't facing a betrayed husband. She was facing a monster, and she had just made it angry. Serena realized she'd reached a dead end. There was no lie left that could save her. No trick that could pull her out of this. Her eyes darted around the foyer, hunting for an exit, an opening, anything that could flip the situation back in her favor. And then she saw it. On the staircase, a small figure stood trembling, brown eyes wide with terror as he looked down at the chaos below. Ethan had slipped out of his room when he heard the noise, and now he was standing there, not understanding what was happening, only knowing that everyone was shouting at Aunt Serena. In a single heartbeat, a reckless thought flashed through Serena's mind. She didn't have to run alone. She had a perfect hostage right in front of her. Before anyone could react, Serena lunged for the stairs with lightning speed. She snatched Ethan, both arms locking the boy's small body to her chest, then backed away toward the rear door. Her voice rang out, crazed and feral. "If I don't get anything, nobody gets anything. Nobody." Nathan surged forward, his face twisted with rage and fear. "Let him go, Serena. This is between you and me. The boy has nothing to do with it." Serena tightened her hold, her arm sliding around Ethan's neck like a snake. "One more step and I'll choke him. You know I'm not joking. I've got nothing left to lose, Nathan. Do you want to test whether I'll do it?" Ethan sobbed, his small body struggling in Serena's grip. His voice broke with raw terror. "Dad, Vivian, help me." Vivian stepped out from the corner of the room, her voice shaking but fighting to stay steady. "Serena, don't do this. Please. He's just a child. He's innocent. He hasn't done anything wrong. Serena snapped her head toward Vivian, her eyes bloodshot and burning with hatred. Shut up. You're the one who ruined everything. If it weren't for you, nobody would know anything. If it weren't for you, I would have succeeded. You stole everything from me, everything I built for 4 years. While Serena was distracted, screaming at Vivian, Nathan signaled Marcus to move in from the side. But Serena wasn't stupid. She saw it instantly and retreated fast toward the rear door, dragging Ethan with her. Don't do anything stupid, she screamed. If anyone dares to follow, I'll kill him. Then, before anyone could stop her, Serena shoved the rear door wide open and hauled Ethan outside. In the darkness, hurried footsteps hammered across the gravel path, followed by the slam of a car door and the roar of an engine. Serena's car shot out of the driveway, tires shrieking on gravel, leaving a cloud of dust before it vanished into the night. Nathan ran to the doorway, eyes tracking the disappearing taillights with desperate fury. He spun to Marcus, his voice a roar. Where's the tracker car? Where is she going? Marcus was already pulling out his phone, checking fast. Sir, I put a GPS tracker in her car earlier, like you ordered. She's heading north of the city. Nathan didn't waste another word. He sprinted to the black SUV parked out front. Follow her. Now. Every second that passes puts my son in more danger. Vivian ran after him, her voice urgent. I'm coming too. I know where she might go. Nathan stopped for a beat, looking at her with suspicion. Vivian spoke quickly. I heard Mrs. Webb mention an old house to the north, Catherine's house before she got married. Serena talked about it when she'd been drinking. She's obsessed with that place. Nathan gave a short nod. Get in. Marcus jumped into the driver's seat. Nathan and Vivian climbed into the back. The SUV tore into the night, chasing the trail of the car carrying the mafia boss's only son, chasing a deranged woman who had lost everything and had nothing left to lose. The life-or-death pursuit had begun, and Nathan knew he had to find Ethan before it was too late. The black SUV tore down the highway, ripping through the pitch-dark night with blinding headlights. Nathan sat in the back seat, his eyes locked on the GPS screen where a small red dot kept moving north without stopping. Vivian sat beside him, her face pale as paper, her hand gripping the door handle so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Marcus was at the wheel, foot pressed all the way down, the engine roaring like a predator in pursuit. She's heading north, Marcus reported, eyes never leaving the road, toward the suburbs. Her speed suggests she's driving very fast, probably over 160 kilometers per hour. Vivian stared at the screen, her brows drawing together as something clicked in her mind. Wait, that direction. Isn't that the old neighborhood? Nathan turned toward her. What old neighborhood? Vivian explained quickly. I heard Mrs. Webb mention it when she was talking to the other maids. Catherine's old house in the suburbs, where she lived before she married you. Serena talks about it when she drinks alone in her room. Mrs. Webb said Serena is obsessed with that place, always muttering to herself about that house like it's something terribly important. Understanding hit Nathan all at once, and it twisted in his chest like a knife. Catherine's old house. The place she lived before he came and pulled her out of an ordinary life into his dangerous underworld. And more than that, it was the route Catherine had driven on that fateful day 4 years ago. The road where she crashed and died. Marcus, head there, Nathan ordered, his voice tight with strain. I know where she's going. In the car racing ahead, Serena sat behind the wheel with wild eyes and trembling hands. She drove like a madwoman, running red lights, swerving across lanes, caring about no traffic law at all. Beside her, Ethan huddled in the passenger seat, tears soaking his small face, his body struggling against the seatbelt that held him pinned in place. Shut up! Serena screamed, her gaze swinging crazily between the road and the crying child. Shut up! Shut up! Shut up! But Ethan didn't stop. For the first time in 4 years, trapped in the darkness of sedatives, the boy found his voice, and he used it to call the name of the person he trusted most, the one who had pulled him out of hell, the one who had shown him what love felt like. Vivian! Ethan screamed, his voice breaking with fear and desperation. Vivian! 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 In the SUV chasing behind, Nathan suddenly heard that cry spill out from the small speaker on the dashboard. Marcus had planted a listening device in Serena's car days ago, on Nathan's orders, and now Ethan's desperate cries were coming straight into their ears. Vivian, Vivian, Vivian. Nathan went rigid, his heart tightening as if a fist had closed around it. His son was calling a name. For the first time in 4 years, the boy was clearly calling someone by name. But that name wasn't Dad. It wasn't Nathan. It was Vivian, the maid with the yellow rubber gloves, the woman Nathan had never bothered to truly see, the one who had slipped into his son's room at night to hold his hand and whisper fairy tales. She was the one Ethan called for in his most desperate moment. She was the one his son trusted and loved. Pain tore through Nathan's chest, not jealousy, but guilt. Where had he been for 4 years when his son needed someone to trust? What had he been doing while Ethan was trapped in darkness, and no one heard his cries? He had let a stranger do what he, as a father, should have done. Vivian sat beside him, tears sliding silently down her cheeks as she listened to Ethan calling her name. She lifted a hand to cover her mouth, fighting back a sob. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice thick. "Hold on just a little longer. I'm coming." Nathan clenched his teeth and turned to Marcus with bloodshot eyes. "Faster. Faster. My son needs me." Serena's car stopped in front of an abandoned house hidden behind rows of towering trees. Dim moonlight poured down, laying a ghostly silver mist over the aging structure. This was Catherine's house before she married Nathan, the place where she had lived the most peaceful years of her life, and also the place closest to the fateful road where she had crashed and died 4 years earlier. Serena yanked Ethan out of the car, dragged him into the deserted house, climbed the rotten wooden staircase, and stepped out onto the second-floor balcony. From here she could see the highway curling in the distance, the road her sister had driven along for the last time, the road Serena had turned into Catherine's resting place with her own hands. Minutes later, Nathan's black SUV tore up, brakes screaming as it stopped in front of the house. Nathan sprang out, ran toward the building, then froze when he looked up at the second-floor balcony. Serena stood there with her back against the decaying railing, both arms locked tight around Ethan's body. She was so close to the edge that one small shove would send them both crashing to the hard ground below. "One more step and I let go." Serena shrieked down, her high voice echoing through the quiet night. "Do you want to see whether I'll do it?" Nathan lifted both hands, forcing his voice steady, even though his heart was pounding wildly. "Serena, calm down. What do you want?" "Money. I'll give you as much as you want. Freedom. I'll let you leave the country and no one will chase you. Whatever you want, I'll give it to you. Just let Ethan go." Serena laughed like a madwoman, her laughter bouncing through the night like the cry of a crow. "Too late. Too late. It's all too late. You think money can fix everything. You think you're someone, the great mafia boss. You have all the money and power in the world, but you can't buy what I want." Nathan tried to take one careful step closer, his voice softer. "You don't want to do this. That's Ethan. He's your nephew. He's Catherine's blood, your sister's blood. Catherine." The name hit Serena like a detonator. She screamed, her voice shrill and full of hate. "Catherine. Always Catherine. My whole life I've heard that name. Beautiful Catherine. Perfect Catherine. Catherine loved by everyone. I hate that name. I hate her. I hate everything she stood for." While Nathan tried to stall and hold Serena's attention, Vivian quietly stepped out of the SUV. She moved toward the house with slow, non-threatening steps, as if she were simply taking a walk in a park on an ordinary afternoon. Nathan saw her and shouted, "Vivian, stop! Don't come closer!" But Vivian didn't stop. She kept walking, her brown eyes lifted to the balcony, meeting Serena's crazed stare. Then she spoke, her voice strangely calm in the suffocating tension. "Serena, I know you're hurting." Serena looked down, eyes narrowing with contempt. "What do you know? You're just a servant, a cheap little maid. What do you know about my pain?" Vivian didn't flinch. She kept walking and kept talking. "I know what it feels like to be abandoned. I know what it feels like to be unloved. I know what it feels like to stand in the dark and watch other people have everything you've ever wanted. I know what it feels like to be invisible, like you don't exist, like you're only someone else's shadow." Serena faltered. Vivian's words landed like needles driven straight into her heart. She stared down at the maid standing in the yard, and for the first time she saw something in Vivian's eyes. Not fear, not contempt, understanding. The understanding of someone who had lived in darkness, who had known loneliness and abandonment. Tears began to spill down Serena's cheeks, the first real tears she had shed after years of wearing a mask. She looked at Vivian, her voice trembling. "You don't understand. You can't understand." Vivian lifted her chin, her voice still calm but filled with a deep sincerity. "Then let me understand. Tell me. You've been hurting for too long. You've been alone for too long. Let me listen." Vivian kept talking, her voice gentle, but carrying a weight that couldn't be denied. "Catherine is gone, Serena. She's been dead for 4 years. You can't win against someone who's already dead. No matter what you do, Catherine will always be the one everyone loved, always the perfect one in people's memories. And you're turning yourself into a monster. Hurting Ethan doesn't lessen your pain. It only turns you into the very thing you hate most." Serena trembled, Vivian's words striking the wall Serena had built over so many years like hammer blows. Her voice cracked, thin and desperate. "You don't understand. You can't understand. No one understands me." Then, like a dam breaking, everything Serena had held inside her whole life began to pour out. She screamed, tears streaming down her face. "Catherine stole everything from me. From the time we were children, from the moment I was old enough to understand the world around me. Father loved her, spoiled her, gave her everything. My stepmother, too. She only had eyes for Catherine, treated me like I didn't exist. Then Nathan came, and of course he loved Catherine, married Catherine, gave her a life like a dream. And me, what was I? I was nothing but a shadow, the bastard child no one wanted to look at, no one acknowledged, no one loved." Nathan stood in the yard, listening to every word, his body pulled tight as wire. He wanted to shout, wanted to charge up there and rip Ethan out of Serena's arms, but he knew any sudden move could put his son in danger. All he could do was stand there, fists clenched, and listen. Serena kept screaming, her voice crazed and full of hate. The crash. Everyone thinks it was an accident. Everyone thinks Catherine was unlucky. Everyone cried for her, but nobody knows the truth. Nathan roared from below, his voice thunder in the night. "What did you do to Catherine's car?" Serena looked down at him, eyes wild and unhinged. Then she screamed the truth she had buried for 4 years. "I sabotaged the brakes. I killed her. I killed my perfect sister." Deadly silence swallowed the abandoned house. Nathan stood as if struck by lightning, his whole body trembling with the fury boiling in his veins. Catherine didn't die in an accident. His wife had been murdered by her own sister. Serena continued, her voice choking between sobs. "I only wanted her dead. I didn't know Ethan was in the car that day. When he survived, I thought it was an opportunity. If he became a vegetable, Nathan would forget him, would hand him to me to take care of, would slowly turn to me. I would have everything Catherine had. Finally, I'd be loved." While Serena was crying and losing focus, Ethan saw his chance. He wasn't the helpless child numbed by sedatives anymore. He opened his mouth and bit down hard on the arm holding him. Serena screamed in pain. An instinct made her loosen her grip for a second, and that second was all Ethan needed. He wrenched free, darting toward the stairs on small legs that were quick and sure. Nathan shot up the staircase like an arrow, taking 2 and 3 steps at a time, catching his son in his arms halfway up. He held Ethan tight, pressing the boy's small body to his chest as if terrified someone might snatch him away again. Marcus charged onto the balcony right after, tackled Serena to the floor, and snapped cuffs on her wrists before she could react. Serena lay on the rotting wooden boards, screaming and sobbing like a madwoman. "I deserve to be loved. I deserve to be loved. Why doesn't anyone love me? Why?" Vivian ran up the stairs, rushed to Nathan and Ethan, and wrapped her arms around both of them, tears soaking her cheeks. The 3 of them stood there, holding one another in the abandoned house, beneath the dim moonlight, in front of the wild screaming of the woman who had caused every piece of this tragedy. Ethan sobbed in his father's arms and Vivian's, but it wasn't the cry of fear anymore. It was the cry of a child finally set free, finally safe in the arms of the people who loved him. And Nathan, the cold, ruthless mafia boss, for the first time in 4 years, let tears run down his cheeks without trying to hide them. Justice was carried out quickly in the weeks following that horrific night. Now, 6 months later, the truth had been fully documented, and the scars were beginning to heal. Nathan sat in his study, and in front of him lay a thick stack of documents containing the results of the sweeping investigation he had ordered. First came the DNA test results. Ethan was 100% Nathan Blackwell's biological son. Not a sliver of doubt, not a single % of error. Serena had lied about Catherine's affair, had invented the story of another man to shake Nathan, to make him question his wife, to justify the crime she had committed. Catherine had never betrayed her husband. She had loved Nathan with her whole heart until the final second of her life. Nathan closed his eyes, feeling as if a portion of the weight had been lifted from his shoulders. At least Catherine's memory remained intact and pure. Next came the findings on the car crash from 4 years earlier. The police had reopened the case with the new evidence Marcus had gathered. The mechanic who had serviced Catherine's car was found and questioned. He admitted that after he finished the work, A woman came to the garage and asked to check the car alone. That woman was Serena Cross. Forensic experts re-examined what remained of the vehicle and confirmed the brake system had been deliberately sabotaged. This wasn't an accident. This was murder. Serena Cross was charged with first-degree murder, along with a long list of additional charges including child abuse, poisoning, kidnapping, and false accusation. With undeniable evidence and her own confession in front of multiple witnesses, the expected sentence was life in prison without parole. She would never see the sunlight of freedom again. Dr. Howard Preston didn't escape either. Under interrogation, he confessed to everything. Serena had paid him to prescribe sedatives for Ethan, had demanded he falsify medical records, had turned a healthy child into a vegetable for 4 years. He was stripped of his medical license permanently and charged as an accomplice to child abuse. His career and his life were effectively over. Back at the mansion, Nathan summoned all the staff into the grand foyer. Mrs. Webb, the elderly housekeeper who had worked here for 20 years, collapsed to her knees at Nathan's feet, tears soaking her wrinkled face. She choked out, I knew something was wrong. I saw Serena give the boy medicine every morning. I saw the boy change after each dose. But I was afraid. I didn't dare speak. Please forgive me." Nathan looked down at her, eyes cold as ice. "Your silence made my son endure 4 years of hell. You watched him suffer every day and did nothing. Get out of my house. Right now." Mrs. Webb sobbed as she was led out of the mansion. And she wasn't the only one. Every employee who knew and chose silence, everyone who turned away from the suffering of a child, was dismissed without mercy. Nathan had no patience for cowardice. The only bright thing in all that darkness was Ethan's recovery. Once the sedatives stopped, the boy recovered at an astonishing speed. He began to talk more, to walk normally. He even ran through the garden with bright laughter echoing across the mansion grounds. The pediatrician Nathan hired examined him and confirmed Ethan had no permanent brain damage at all. The boy was making a remarkable recovery. He needed time to heal both his body and his spirit. Every step he took on the lawn was a victory of medical science, physical therapy, and most of all, the unwavering love from Nathan and Vivian. One afternoon, Nathan called Vivian into his study. She came in with a worried expression, not knowing what her employer wanted to say. Nathan stood by the window, looking out at the garden where Ethan was playing, then turned to face her. His voice was low and sincere. "Thank you, Vivian. You saved my son. You saved me." Vivian lowered her head, her cheeks warming. "I only did what anyone would do. And I think, now that everything is over, I should go. My work here is done." Nathan stepped closer, stopping in front of her, his gaze holding hers with a sincerity she had never seen in this man. "Stay. Not as a maid, as Ethan's tutor. He needs you. He trusts you more than anyone in this world." He paused for a moment, then added, his voice softer, "And I do too." Vivian lifted her head, met Nathan's eyes, and for the first time she didn't see a cold mafia boss, but a father trying to mend what had been broken, a man searching for redemption. She nodded. "I'll stay." The mansion that had once been cold and gloomy like a prison had changed completely. The heavy curtains were replaced with light sheer drapes that let sunlight spill into every corner. Children's laughter echoed through the hallways, the sound of little feet running across wooden floors, bright voices calling out in playful bursts. This was no longer a house of darkness and secrets. This was a real home. Ethan was attending school normally at an elementary school near the estate, and he fit in quickly with his classmates. He wasn't the child curled into himself in a wheelchair with empty eyes anymore. He was a lively, mischievous, quick 6-year-old, the fastest kid in his class. His teacher couldn't stop praising his intelligence and how quickly he learned. The doctor said 4 years of being poisoned with sedatives had left no permanent physical damage, but Ethan's spirit would need time to heal. Thankfully, he had Vivian beside him. Vivian had officially become Ethan's tutor, no longer the maid in yellow rubber gloves scrubbing floors. She helped him with homework every afternoon, read him fairy tales every night, and she was the first person he searched for when nightmares woke him in the dark. Alongside caring for Ethan, Vivian returned to college to finish the psychology degree she had been forced to abandon years ago. Nathan covered her entire tuition, but Vivian insisted she would repay every dollar after graduation, once she had steady work. She didn't want to owe anyone anything, even if that person was Nathan Blackwell. Nathan had changed too. The cold mafia boss of yesterday now came home earlier, spent more time with his son, and smiled more. He still ran his underworld empire, Still the powerful man all of Chicago treated with caution. But the moment he stepped through the mansion gates, he became an ordinary father, an ordinary man learning how to love again from the beginning. What grew between Nathan and Vivian wasn't love at first sight. It didn't arrive in one dramatic moment or an unexpected kiss. It was built slowly, day by day, from respect to trust, and then from trust into something deeper. Neither of them had dared to name. It was in the mornings when the three of them sat down for breakfast, Ethan chattering about the dream he'd had the night before, Vivian laughing and asking for more details, and Nathan watching them with a quiet smile on his mouth. It was in the late nights after Ethan was asleep, when Nathan and Vivian talked in the living room, about life, about the past, about the future, about things they had never shared with anyone else. It was in the stolen looks when they thought the other wasn't paying attention, the shared smiles when Ethan did something silly, the accidental brush of hands that made them both startle. That afternoon, Nathan came home earlier than usual. When he stepped into the garden, he saw Ethan racing a few neighborhood kids across the green lawn. The boy was far in front, small legs pumping fast, brown hair flying in the wind. He crossed the finish line first and turned with a radiant grin when he spotted his father. "Dad, I'm the fastest." Ethan ran to Nathan, arms lifted to be picked up. Nathan laughed, bent down, scooped his son up, and spun him around until the boy squealed with laughter. "You did great. Who taught you to run so fast?" "Vivian taught me," Ethan said, still panting from the race. "She said she learned to run to catch the bus when she was little, because if she missed the bus, her feet would get tired from walking." Nathan lifted his eyes toward the porch, where Vivian stood leaning against a column, watching father and son with a gentle smile. The golden afternoon sun lit her face, making her warm brown eyes shine. And in that moment, Nathan felt something he thought he had lost forever after Catherine died. Happiness. "Go inside and get some water." Nathan set Ethan down and ruffled his hair. "I want to talk to Vivian for a moment." Ethan looked at his father, then at Vivian, a mischievous grin spreading across his face. "Dad wants to talk grown-up stuff again." Then before Nathan could react, the boy giggled and ran inside, leaving Nathan and Vivian standing in the sun-soaked garden, surrounded by birdsong and the faint scent of flowers. Nathan and Vivian stood facing each other in the garden, the late afternoon sun, honey gold, spilling across her shoulders and lighting up her brown hair and warm eyes. Nathan drew a deep breath, searching for the right words for what he needed to say. "The lawyer called me today." Vivian heard that, and her face tightened with worry at once. "Is it something about custody? Did Serena do something from prison?" Nathan shook his head. "No, it isn't about Ethan. They called about your employment contract." Vivian went pale, her heart seeming to skip a beat. What had she done wrong? Had she become too close to this family? Had she crossed a line a tutor wasn't supposed to cross? Did I do something wrong? Nathan looked at her, his eyes gentle in a way she had never seen in him before. "I want to cancel the contract." Vivian's heart sank. She had known this day would come. She was only a maid, a temporary tutor, not someone who belonged in Nathan Blackwell's world. She lowered her head, her voice small and trembling. "I understand. If you need me to leave, I'll pack tonight." But Nathan stepped closer, stopping right in front of her. "You don't understand, Vivian. I don't want you to be an employee anymore." Vivian lifted her head, confusion filling her eyes. Nathan continued, his voice low and sincere. "When I came home that day and saw you on the lawn with Ethan, I didn't just see a babysitter. I saw what this house had been missing for 4 years. I saw what I had been missing for 4 years. Light, laughter, warmth." He paused, then went on. "These past 6 months, you've taught me how to be a father. You taught me money and power mean nothing if there's no one to share laughter with. You taught me love can't be bought with dollars. It has to be built with time and sincerity. You saved us, Vivian. Both Ethan and me." Nathan reached into his jacket and took out a small black velvet box, then lifted the lid. Inside was a delicate platinum necklace, with a finely crafted pendant shaped like a tiny paper airplane. Vivian stared at it, eyes wide with surprise. "This was the first thing Ethan drew when he recovered," Nathan explained. "A paper airplane. He said it symbolized freedom, being able to fly anywhere you want without anyone stopping you. I had someone make it into a necklace for you." He took the necklace out and gently fastened it around Vivian's neck. "I'm not proposing. Not yet. I know you need to finish school. You need your own path. You need to prove to the world and to yourself that you can stand on your own 2 feet. I respect that, but I want you to stay. Not as staff, not as a tutor, but as family, the three of us. No contract, no boundaries, no distance, just us. Vivian felt tears rise in her eyes, and she couldn't hold them back anymore. They slid down her cheeks, but these weren't the tears of pain she had shed so many times in her life. These were tears of happiness. "You and Ethan saved me too," she whispered, her voice thick. "I had nothing before I came here. No family, no home, no future. Ethan gave me a reason to live, gave me someone to love and protect. And you gave me a place to belong." Vivian nodded, then lifted herself onto her toes and wrapped her arms around Nathan. He held her back, tight, feeling the warmth of her body seep into the cold space inside his chest. Then they kissed. Their first kiss. Slow, sweet, full of promise. Not the blazing kiss of passion, but the gentle kiss of two souls who had found each other after so much suffering. Dad and Vivian are kissing. Gross. Ethan's voice rang out from the porch, making them jolt and pull apart. He stood there holding a glass of water, his face twisted like he'd just bitten into a lemon. Nathan and Vivian looked at each other, then both burst into laughter. Ethan ran over, wedged himself between them, and all three of them held each other in the garden drenched in sunset. "I want us to go to the beach tomorrow," Ethan said, his eyes lighting up. Vivian has never seen the ocean. Nathan looked at Vivian in surprise. "Really? You've never seen the ocean?" Vivian blushed, a little embarrassed. "I didn't go many places when I was little. The ocean was always a distant dream for me." Nathan smiled, the warmest smile he'd had since Catherine died. "Then pack your bags. Tomorrow we go to the beach. The day after we go to the mountains. We've got a whole lifetime to make up for the time we lost." The three of them walked into the house together, warm yellow light spilling out from inside to welcome them. Nathan watched Vivian holding Ethan's hand, watched his son talking nonstop about waves and sandcastles, and he realized something. Happiness had come into his life through the back door, in a cheap green uniform and bright yellow rubber gloves. It didn't arrive in the form he expected, didn't come the way he had imagined, but it came, and it was real. The door closed behind them, leaving the garden to sink into the gentle darkness of night. That garden now held a secret, the secret of how a pair of cheap yellow gloves had changed the fate of three souls forever. Their story didn't end with the familiar line "they lived happily ever after." It ended with something better, truer, and more beautiful. They were brave, and they truly lived. The story ends here. From this story, we can draw many valuable lessons for life. First, sincere love doesn't need money or status. It only needs a heart that knows how to care and is willing to sacrifice. Vivian had nothing but her kindness, yet she saved a child in a way millions of dollars couldn't. Second, never stay silent in the face of evil, because silence is complicity. Third, family isn't about blood. It's about the people willing to stand by you in your hardest moments. And finally, happiness sometimes comes from the places you least expect, as long as you open your heart to receive it. Thank you for following the story all the way to the final minute. How did you feel about this story? Did it remind you of anything in real life? Please leave a comment and share what's in your heart. We truly want to listen. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and share the video with the people you love. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the touching stories we bring you every day. Wishing everyone watching this video good health, a joyful life, and days filled with calm and peace. Goodbye, and see you in the next video.